I'll call to order this meeting of the Governor Stoughton trustees, and I want to begin by thanking my former colleagues on the Governor Stoughton Trust Land Committee who spent 2 years working on ideas for the best use of the town farm property. I'd also like to thank my two current colleagues, Mr. Hurley and Mr. Shields. We have been meeting in several executive sessions to discuss the sale or lease of the property, and specifically 5 bids that were received as a result of a request for proposals. I'd also like to thank Marion McGettrick, who spent 12 years as a selectman, and we've kept her on what we call kept her on duty now, even after she's finished her term, in order to have at our disposal her wealth of knowledge and experience about the town farm. I'd also like to thank the town administrator, Kevin Murn, and the planning director, Bill Clark. Tonight, the trustees are ready to vote. We're going to disseminate to the public the 5 proposals, and as the public knows, there has been 2 proposals that have had the support of the trustees in recent months. We've gotten it down to 2, and tonight we're going to make our final choice. Because of the fact that the public is not yet aware of the details of those proposals, we are going to invite the public to a special meeting on Monday, June 27th at 8 o'clock back at the Council on Aging, at which time we certainly welcome the public's input specifically into what your concerns, what you think we should have in a purchase and sale agreement that would be in the best interests of the town, your feedback, etc. It's only the beginning of what still will be a bit of a process. Once the trustees approve of a plan, then that plan needs the blessings of the Attorney General's office, the charitable division, and it needs the approval of probate court. That being said, one of the things that is going to happen tonight is that the trustees each will get the opportunity to put on the table for the public their views on the future use of that land. And I'd like to start right out, if I may, by putting on the table the fact that I'd like to make a motion to award the proposal to the Copeland Foundation.
Bob, I cannot guarantee I'll vote that way, but for the purpose of opening discussion, I will second the motion.
Okay, I would appreciate that. Thank you. I'm going to read the motion, and that is that the Milton Board of Selectmen, sitting as trustees of the Governor Stoughton Trust, pursuant to Chapter 30B, Section 16 of the Mass General Laws, vote to accept the proposal of the Copeland Family Foundation as being the most advantageous proposal from a responsible and responsive proposer for the purchase of the Governor Stoughton Trust property, which proposal was submitted in response to the request for proposals for the lease or sale of the Governor Stoughton Trust property issued by the Milton Board of Selectmen as trustees of the Governor Stoughton Trust, and that the Milton Board of Selectmen, sitting as trustees of the Governor Stoughton Trust, vote to award to the Copeland Family Foundation a contract for the purchase of said property, subject to the following conditions: 1, negotiation of a purchase and sale agreement; 2, approval of said purchase by the Office of Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Mass; and 3, approval of said purchase by the Massachusetts Court of Competent Jurisdiction. And I thank you, Mr. Hurley, for the second, and I'd like to state briefly where I'm at. And at home I have papers that are 1.5 feet in height that are all from the Governor Stoughton Trust Land Committee and information that I've received as a trustee since I've been a selectman. And my information, my position is based on my judgment of all the documents, information, conversations, etc., and my knowledge of the Governor Stoughton property. And I have prepared a statement. It is not long, but I'm very comfortable with it. Since William Stoughton died in 1701, we can only interpret what he would have wanted for the best use of his land. We do, however, know from his will that he gave what he called his great wood lot to the town of Milton for the benefit of the poor of that town, as the selectmen thereof shall judge best. As a selectman trustee, my best judgment is that the awarded proposal should go to the Copeland Foundation. By way of background, the generosity of the Copelands began more than 50 years ago when Charlie Copeland sponsored the Milton Springs Bottling Little League team. Since Charlie's passing and that of his wife Gladys, the town of Milton has been blessed countless times by the phenomenal generosity of the Copeland Foundation. They have earned our loyalty and, most importantly, our trust. Their proposal offers benefit to the poor of Milton in several ways. First is their monetary offer. It is simple, no strings attached. It's an offer of $750,000 at closing and $250,000 each of the next 4 years. It is a conservative, low-risk approach. It doesn't have any what-ifs. Secondly, the Copelands have offered an additional $580,000 to restore the 1871 Men's Arms House and offer it to the Milton Food Pantry for a permanent home. They will also contribute $30,000 to $50,000 annually for the food pantry. Under the terms of Stoughton's will, as selectmen thereof judging best, the Copeland Foundation's proposal is a clear winner. The impact on town services is minimal. You won't need additional school teachers, firemen, policemen, or public works employees. And you won't have additional traffic volume. Finally, the Copeland Foundation proposal would most noticeably conform to the Milton Historical Commission's wishes by preserving 2 of the existing structures, as well as preserving the open space with its fields, orchards, and walking paths. Thank you.
I'd just like to say a few words. Basically, I got into this process obviously later in the game. By the time I got into the process, it was already narrowed down to 2 proposals. I could have chose to open it back up and looked at the other proposals again. I chose not to. After reading the proposals, I think that the selection that was made by the former trustees was the correct one, and it would only belabor the whole process by doing that, so I chose not to. So looking at the 2 proposals, first and foremost, there is nothing that I would like better than to keep that property open space. It's beautiful land. I absolutely agree with that. The problem I have looking at all of it is Governor Stoughton in his will didn't say, here is the land to keep as open space. Governor Stoughton in his will said, here is the land to provide for the poor. And somebody would have to convince me, and nobody has yet, that open space provides for the poor. I'm not sure it does. As much as I'd like to have it, I'm not sure that it does. We're dealing with a Pulte proposal and a Copeland proposal. The Copeland proposal proposed $1.7 million to purchase the property, would allow the animal shelter to stay there, would even provide money to the animal shelter to build, which is a noble cause, and I absolutely want the animal shelter to stay in that property. We've been told countless times that we cannot consider the animal shelter as benefit to the poor. in evaluating any of this. The other thing that it would do, which certainly does benefit the poor, is the food pantry. So that was another approximately $400,000 or so to rehab one of those structures to make it a home for the food pantry. That brings us to about $2.3 million. The $50,000 or so that of cash donation to the food pantry already is being made by the Copeland Foundation. That's my understanding. So that's not new money. That's just redirected money. So I guess I didn't consider that when I looked at things. The Pulte proposal is a proposal. First of all, it's a $5 million purchase price. So we're looking at 2.4 compared to 5. Granted, prices and everything. One of they provided for 3 options. One of those 3 options, and it's the one I like the most, would be a cluster development of, I believe, 23 homes on 30 of the 34 acres. And cluster development, and I'm not a zoning expert, but cluster development is done to preserve the most amount of open space possible while building residential developments. And it does have to be vetted out by the Planning Board, by the Conservation Commission, and the Board of Health. So there's quite a few hurdles that have to be gone through before a cluster development can get approved. The other 4 acres, which are presently where the animal shelter is and where the other structures are, would be turned back over to the trustees. So we'd get the $5 million, we'd get the 4 acres of land back. We've already talked to the proposer in terms of the animal shelter, because it is, first and foremost, I would like the animal shelter to remain where it is. They would have no problem with the animal shelter remaining on those 4 acres of land. And they would also do whatever we want with the other structures on that 4 acres, either raise them, leave them there. So I think it offers us, certainly the ability to leave the animal shelter where it is. It leaves us open space. Even though the 30 acres will be developed, it will be developed with quite a bit of open space. And I feel confident that will happen. And like I said, it will leave us additional land that, as trustees, we can somehow benefit the poor. We can leave as open space if we'd like to. There's a lot of different things we could do with it. And again, if it were my choice, I would just keep the rest of it as open space. So that's, I guess, where I'm coming from at this point. And like Bob said, and it's very true, that we're only in the beginning stages of this. Ultimately, the decision is ours to make, but it's going to be second guessed no matter what we do. The process from here is we have to negotiate a purchase and sale agreement with whoever we choose. Once that purchase and sale agreement, we also have to talk about are there going to be any deed restrictions on the property when we deed it over, and that's certainly input that we would love to hear back from the public on whatever proposal we choose, and certainly if there should be things in the purchase and sale agreement after you read through the proposals. Again, your feedback would be more than welcome on that. The procedure after that is we have to submit it to the Attorney General and to the probate court. The Attorney General is either the Attorney General doesn't make a decision on it. All they will do is recommend to the probate court that they either concur or they do not concur with our selection. If they don't concur with our selection, the chance of that proposal actually being accepted by the probate court and allowed to go forward is basically slim and none. And basically that's how I kind of looked at the proposal. I had a ranking system when I looked through all the proposals based upon the historic preservation, based upon the the benefit to the poor, the various, and it kind of went through all of the various aspects in the request for proposal, all of the conditions that were set forth, and try to rate them. And, to be perfectly honest, the Copeland Foundation proposal was doing great until you get to price. And you have to put some weight on price. And once you get there, for me, the price is just, at this point, too far apart. I don't know, John, if you have anything you want to say.
Well, just a couple of things. For the purposes of discussion, first of all, can I ask Mr. Clark to describe what cluster zoning is and explain that as far as what Mr. Hurley just said about open space?
Cluster zoning would allow the number of houses that would be allowed under your regular zoning, under normal zoning. Up there we have 34 acres. We could put in 34 single-family homes, doing simple math. Doing the cluster, you would take and put all those houses together. It wouldn't be 1 acre lots. It would be bringing the houses in tighter together, and it would be a development, and therefore the extra acreage would remain as open space. We have wetlands up there. We know that we want X amount of open space, whether it's leaving nature, leaving buffer zones, whatever the future use of that is, but it would be taking all those homes and putting them tighter together so that it formed a neighborhood, not individual single-family homes on 1 acre lots.
Thanks, Bill.
It's a simplistic answer.
I just, as far as comments are concerned, I just want to talk a little bit about how the process has gone. The first thing I want to do is to thank the patience of the residents of Milton for watching us go through all this thing. This is my 12th year as a selectman. This is the most open process that I've ever been involved with. We started this back in 2007 when we were asked by the people from the animal shelter to build a new animal shelter next door, right next to where the present one is. We were all for that. When we talked to our overseers, basically, which is the trust division of the Attorney General's office, they told us that they had been concerned about the Governor Stoughton Trust for a while, in that we didn't have an overarching plan for the whole, for what we were doing as trustees. The amount that we had in the trust, which is our charge, which is to help the poor of Milton, which was in the last will and testament of Governor Stoughton. And I have to emphasize that is, as trustees, that is what our main focus should be. And I think that would be backed up by the Attorney General and by a probate court judge. How can you help the poor? How does this plan, whatever you decide to do, help the poor? And are there any other things available that would help the poor more? So that's what started it. Mr. Sweeney has made reference to the committee that we appointed back then. They deliberated for a long time. We got their final report in 2009, December of 2009, I believe, and they did a tremendous job. In that report, there was an appraisal. The report suggested that $5 million was the amount that we should be striving for to convert if we were going to do something with the land, sell or lease, that the equivalent of $5 million should be the amount that we should shoot for. We then went through a fairly lengthy, I think, Mrs. McGettrick was our chair last year, with Mr. Sweeney, process in which we publicly wrote the RFP. We took probably 10 or 12 meetings where we took half an hour to an hour at each meeting and talked about the things that we wanted in the request for proposals to bidders, with the advice of Town Council, John Flynn. When we did get that RFP and the report, actually, when we get the RFP together, we sent that. All this stuff has been going into the Attorney General's office through the process, just so they knew what we were doing, so that they knew that we were trying to formulate a plan. Nothing had happened for like 300 years on that with the trustees on the property, or not a lot. And so we felt that we were coming to together to get a plan together to present to the Attorney General and ultimately to a court, to the probate court. We did get 5 responses to the RFP. One from a group called Community Builders, one from the Copeland Foundation, one from the Governor Stoughton Land Preservation, one from Pulte Home Builders, and one from Weston Associates. And the way that the bids were presented to us were in two phases. One was the actual proposal with no mention of money, no mention of price. The price came later. And I agree with Mr. Hurley. If you, after I read the non-price proposals, with having no knowledge of what the actual money bids were, I had Pulte actually 3rd or 4th on my list of possible people that we would award the bid to, with Copeland being number 1. Because I actually really liked the Weston Associates one too. I really was impressed with that one. However, for various reasons, because of different reasons where they did not comply with what we had put in the RFP, 3 of the proposals were eliminated, which left us with 2, Pulte and Copeland. And that happened after we saw the prices. Pulte by far bid the most money. It's $5 million. With the governor, with the other leading bidder, the Copeland Foundation at 1.75, and they talk about the $585,000 to restore the building. That, in my opinion, has to be excluded, because a probate court judge would not tell you that that has any benefit to the poor. And everyone has to be aware that that is our main, that is what we're here for. We are trustees. We do not have our selectmen's hats on in this. So it comes down to, in my mind, it comes down to we can do more to help the poor once the sale of the land has taken place with $5 million than $1.75 million. And I've been involved with a number of development issues in town the last few years. The mall on Randolph Avenue, for one, the tremendous debate over the Temple issue last year. The thing you have to understand is the Copeland Foundation, the Pulte Home Builders proposal adheres to the current zoning, which is AA residential. Also, so that it wouldn't require a zoning change, it's the way that the zoning was laid out long ago. Also, so it wouldn't be changing the neighborhood in any substantial way, even if single-family homes were built. They're talking about homes of a value of over $1 million. And we then retain under Plan C, they had an A, B, and C. Under Plan C and B, actually, we retained the 4 acres with which we can do what we want. So if you put a value on it, a financial value, it's not only the $5 million that we get in cash with which we can do what we want. We also retain the 4 acres that now have an assessed value, and we can we can then go forward and do things there, like restore the animal shelter if they indeed want to stay at that location. And it stays within the trust. So financially, it's a much better deal than the Copeland Foundation. That's not to say the Copeland Foundation, Mr. Sweeney is absolutely right. Over time, they've done a tremendous amount of good things for the town. And we've said this over the last 6 or 7 weeks. If their bid had been higher, a little bit higher, it would have been so much easier to go with them. But I just don't think, it's my opinion, and this is based on conversations I've had, and that I don't think that we could pass muster taking that much of a lower bid with a probate court judge, given the responsibility that we have as trustees. And so, I intend to vote for the Pulte proposition. I think it's the best thing for our charge for the poor of Milton. You can do, as I say, you can do a lot more with $5 million for the poor than 1.75. So that's the way I will vote.
We'll make one comment and then ask for a vote. In terms of the request for proposals, I evaluated each one, all 5 proposals. And the selectmen trustees spent a lot of time in public going over what the criteria was going to be in the selection process. That criteria included such things as, well, it was rated between highly advantageous and disadvantageous. I did a graph using each criteria. So when it comes to which one rates best with open space, it's a no-brainer. It's the Copeland proposal. When it comes to not having an impact on town services, it's a no-brainer. It's the Copelands. So what happened was, when I evaluated them, I did so first without monetary concern, because that's the way the trustees received them. We received non-price proposals first. So I didn't see the price until after I evaluated them. In my scoring, when I got to price, I obviously, like my 2 colleagues, consider money important. We all do. I gave that a value of 5 times greater than the other criteria that I used. However, my final score was 116 for Copeland and 99 for Pulte. Why? Because Pulte, despite its $5 million, wasn't able to overcome an insurmountable lead for the other criteria that the trustees selected when we were doing the RFP.
Can I just respond to that for a second?
Mm-hmm.
I take what you say to heart, and I've been through these meetings with you, so I know you're sincere. But I would respectfully say this. The impact on town services, while significant, is historically what we've always done. We've always been single-family home developers here in the town, okay? That being said, it should not be, the impact on town services and open space should not be the criteria by which we make this vote. Because those are decisions that basically a planning board or a board of selectmen would make. We are sitting here this evening as trustees of a man's last will and testament. He put in his will, just like you would want your will to be, or anyone would want their will to be respected and taken at with the same intent that it was made. He wanted his will to be that the land be used with the best advice the selectmen could give for the poor of Milton. And so that criteria, a lot of what your criteria was, Bob, when we saw the non-price proposals, is right. But it doesn't, it won't pass muster. Especially, we should also say this evening that during the process, we also contracted and got another appraisal, a private appraisal from appraiser Murray Regan, who set the appraisal slightly less than the $5 million. Those are things that that a probate court judge is going to look at. Those are things the Attorney General is going to look at. And to bring a proposal before them that's so much less than the $5 million, it will not, I believe, it's my belief that it would not pass muster. So, you know, we'd be back to the drawing board. We do not have enough enough money or income in the trust to go backwards. We have to go forwards. And to me, all the arguments, while my heart is not with Pulte, my head and my responsibility towards the Governor Stoughton will says I have to be with Pulte. And I've listened to the criteria that you've had, that you've set, and it's right from a selectman's point of view. We do want open space. We don't want you know, adverse impacts on town services. But the proposal that we have from Pulte has the least amount. It's actually the same exact proposal as the neighbors from Indian Cliff, Mr. Mulligan and Mr. Friedman, put in. They had 21 single-family homes on the 34 acres as opposed to the 30. This way we retain 4 acres and we still get the tax benefit of the $1 million homes. So, you know, to me, while we'd like to take the Copeland Foundation bid, to me the Pulte bid is the one that we have to take, or we will be back to square one. We're going to have citizens speak on what, the 27th?
Yeah.
Before the vote, I want to request that the selectmen put back on the selectmen's hat, because Governor Stoughton appointed the selectmen of the town of Milton for a reason. He didn't appoint an outsider trustee. And I believe that was done, and we intend to doing something like that, and be so that the town business are taken into consideration when the development of the property is considered.
Well, as I said, I couldn't hear that last part.
So you shouldn't take off your selectman hat like you said you were going to.
My selectman's hat is firmly on my head.
You said you were taking it off, and that you had to take it off to make this decision.
The trustees, we are sitting here as trustees, not as selectmen. And besides,
Trustees as selection of the town for a reason.
no, well,
It wasn't an
6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
trustee, but it was a trust.
Well.
For a reason. And I think that was the governor's intent, and I think it should be considered.
Mrs. McGettrick, did you wish to comment before I call for a vote? Am I putting you on the spot?
Well, let me just say that I have indeed participated in this process right up until the date that our new selectman was elected, and congratulations to him for being able to be sitting on the board and make this decision. And I know he's taken his responsibility very seriously. And it's correct, the process as described was that, first of all, we had a lot of discussion about what our role was as selectmen and as trustees. So while it might sound like, you know, in one comment perhaps that Mr. Shields made that we weren't thinking of ourselves as selectmen, I don't believe in the time that I served or now anyone has ever forgotten that we are selectmen, and we understand that that's a very unique position that the selectmen have been put in here, that they are the selectmen and that they are also the trustees of the Governor Stoughton Trust. The problem is that trustees of a trust have a responsibility to make decisions with a very high order of care to follow the trust, to carry out the purposes of the trust. So I think what's being described here by your board members is their attempt to follow the purpose of the trust and to do what they have to do in their duties as trustees of the Governor Stoughton Trust. That's why we had a committee appointed The fact that this is a very unique situation where the selectmen serve both as selectmen and as trustees. Selectmen appointed a committee, they had a long public process and a lot of discussion, had appraisals done, talked about various purposes for the property, and wrote a full report and then got feedback on that from the public. That's why the selectmen, in considering whether to issue an RFP to discuss uses for the property, had a long public process and took a lot of public input and allowed comment, I think is true to a very great extent, on what should be in the RFP, what sorts of issues should be considered as the selectmen think about, whether this property should be used for some different purpose than it is currently. So there has been a lot of discussion of that joint role, and what it boils down to is that the selectmen have to do both, but they must keep, and we've been met numerous times with the Attorney General's Charitable Public Charities Division to discuss this responsibility and to understand just what it consists of, that they must keep in front of them the primary responsibility in the trust is to the poor of Milton, because that's the way Governor Stoughton wrote his will. That doesn't mean that selectmen can't consider issues that will affect the town in thinking about what should be done with this property. And if you read through the RFP that was produced, all of those issues that might affect the town are in there, and they were considered. And I can tell you that when I did my own rating system, I basically thought of the RFP as being in 3 sections. The first section was how the proposal will benefit the poor of Milton. The second part of the proposal were all the criteria that related to how the proposal will impact the town's infrastructure and how it will relate to our zoning requirements and issues such as that. The third part of the proposal is how well qualified is the proposer financially and otherwise to actually carry out this proposal. So there were really 3 sections in the RFP, and I assigned a rating to each section, and then I put all those weights together. And of course, price became the additional criteria. And so we didn't make a final decision as a board, and we were still discussing this issue, but the comments that are being made about the fact that you have to consider the fact that you can do a great deal more with a price that also, very importantly, reflects the fair market value of the property, as indicated by a recent appraisal. That you can do a lot more for the poor if you are going to dispose of the property in some way, if you get that price, than if you choose to take a much lower price and keep it as open space. I believe that, I agree, and I agree with the sentiments expressed, that we probably will have some substantial difficulty if we try to go to probate court with one of the much lower price proposals that we got here. That doesn't mean that they just look at price. I believe that the board did a pretty good and comprehensive job writing the RFP, and that all of the criteria the board wants us to look at, wanted to be examined, were addressed to a greater or lesser extent by each of the proposers. And in going through all the proposals and assigning the final ratings, I considered every one of those criteria. And, again, this decision is a decision to be made by the Board of Selectmen. I'm no longer on the Board of Selectmen. But if it's helpful to know what my thought process was and what I did in thinking about what we should do here, those were the steps that we took. I think we've thought very carefully, and that we've consulted with as many experts, both legal and otherwise, as we could in order to get good advice before we went forward. And at this point, a decision does need to be arrived at, and I applaud the board for whatever they ultimately decide to do. Thank you.
I'd just like to add one other thing. The criteria that we're under, or the law that we're under when we look at these proposals is Chapter 30B of Mass General Laws. That's very specific when you are going to sell real property as to what that procedure is. Unfortunately, Chapter 30B does not allow you to negotiate a selling price. It does not allow, it only provides, I believe if it's over $25,000, that you have a sealed bid process. Had we been able to negotiate with the Copelands, say your price isn't enough, that would have been great, but we were precluded from doing that. We had to take a look at the proposals based upon what was in there. We could ask for clarification of what was in there, but we couldn't negotiate any additional things. Had the Copeland proposal, even though the 1.7 million was a low price, put in other uses of the land that would benefit the poor, we could have considered it, and put a monetary value on that. But it didn't. So those were the problems that we had with it. And it is unfortunate because as I rated the non-price proposal, I think we're all in agreement that the Copeland Foundation proposal was very good in terms of the non-price part of it. It didn't, beyond the, it didn't, in my opinion, do any more than any other proposals in terms of direct benefit for the poor, with the exception of the with the exception of the food pantry. It's just unfortunate, I think. It really is.
How much of the service is going to cost the town, though?
Well, there's probably going to be about $400,000 a year in new growth.
It's going to cost the town in terms of services, school fees, police and fire.
Well, if you look
Have
at,
you been done on that to compare the price?
yeah, well, first of all, are we going to add any new firemen? I don't believe so. Are we going to add any new police? I don't believe so.
You have all those new residents, I think you would have to.
You'll have 23 new houses. As far as I know, as far as I know right now, that we have enough police and we have enough fire to service the town. There wouldn't be any expectation of adding additional police or fire. Pardon me? The access would be via Oncody Road.
However, if we choose Plan C, which is that the town retain the 4 acres, the 4 acres would split the parcel, and it would be 4 acres and 30 acres. The 4 acres that we would retain under the trust would still be accessible from Governor Stoughton.
Has there been a legal opinion that the court can accept the other proposal from Copeland? You're saying that that's one of the reasons
The-
going with the other one. Is there any legal opinion out there?
There's been discussion that's taken place with Attorney Joanna Soros from the Charitable Division, and the discussion that took place, I believe Attorney Flynn was there, Marion McGettrick, and the town administrator to discuss the Pulte proposal and the Copeland proposal. I don't know, one thing that I didn't want and hope that it certainly didn't happen, I didn't want the Attorney General to have an undue influence on the decision of the trustees, and hopefully that that discussion has no bearing on the decision.
How can you not put a monetary value on redoing the barn and putting the food pantry there? I think that's a significant value. It doesn't seem like there's enough.
It's a value, yes, but it is not a value to the benefit of the poor.
Sure it is. Of course it is. How can you say that that's not a value to the poor?
It's not.
The value that I agree with you that I think the food pantry certainly does benefit the poor. I mean, I don't think there's any question about that. But I consider the rehabilitation costs.
Your co-trustee says there's no value to the poor.
Well, I
Well,
guess
John.
we can agree to disagree on that. But
John, the food pantry has told us that they don't necessarily want to move up there. That most of,
Now you're giving me a different answer. You told me that you thought there was no value. So you're prejudiced on the issue. Absolutely there's value.
I do not believe,
There's no value.
I do not believe that it has a value to the poor, the renovation of that building.
Your co-trustee says it does, and I think.
No, it's going to be 21 single-family housing. It's zoned
How much of the house is gonna be valued at?
over $1 million.
Each?
yes,
That's for the poor?
No. The transfer,
see, they can't hear the crowd.
the land will be sold. The $5 million remains in the trust, and that trust is what will be used to benefit the poor. That's been the whole scenario the whole time. That's been our charge the whole time.
For the land, not the $5 million you're gonna waste somewhere.
The poor of
You
Milton.
blow all that money like you blow everything else.
So this is working.
Okay.
Can't believe that the Copeland Foundation will just let that land sit there and do nothing. You can't believe that they will not make improvements to help the poor.
That's,
They've been doing it for 50 years, they have a long record of it, they gave so much to this town, and you just can't say they're just gonna buy the land and keep it there.
That's a
Just the same way.
$5 million you're gonna put for the poor, what are you gonna do with it? You're gonna put it in the budget and spend it. You're not gonna, wait, you got a special poor box someplace? When are you gonna get it?
The money, sir, the trust, the
Railroading this thing right off the map.
the Governor Stoughton Trust has been separate from the town budget for 300 years. It's not going to change any. Yeah,
benefit the poor of Milton with $5 million.
If Governor Stoughton wanted housing, he could have sold his land and taken the money he got for it and put it into the trust that way.
Governor Stoughton just left the land. See, that's the thing. Governor Stoughton just left the land to benefit the poor. The buildings, Stan, that were built there were not built with money from the Governor Stoughton Trust.
Have you checked on the housing, on the poultry housing? Have you checked on what they've, on any lawsuits or any complaints about them?
they're a very reputable builder.
AG's office is suing them.
How does the cluster development benefit the poor of Milton? Mr. Sweeney?
Well, let's answer let's answer one question at a time, please. One question at a time.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yeah, let-
Mr. Sweeney, may I be recognized?
I'll recognize you in a minute, Mrs. Kelly. I don't want the meeting to get out of hand. Originally tonight, there was not going,
Voting on it without getting.
originally tonight, there was not going to be much citizen participation because of the fact that the nature of the meeting was that the information that we've been discussing in private was going to be released in public tonight, and we wanted citizens, we wanted citizens to have knowledge of what they were going to talk. However, the meeting now has become somewhat public, so let's set up a little bit of forum. We'll set up a time scenario here. It's getting near 8 o'clock. Why don't we say 15 minutes where the public is invited to comment. What's before you right now is the Copeland, a motion to award the RFP to the Copeland Foundation. If you wish to speak, I'll recognize you. Would you state your name and your address, please? Yes.
Scott Johnson, 11 Forsyth Street. I just have a question, I don't have a comment. Are we forced to accept one of these RFPs? Do we have to even accept one? Can we just let it table it and let it die?
I think the answer is that the trustees feel that there's a compelling need to address the town farm situation, that the buildings are dilapidated, and I, for one, have felt for the last several years, let's stop ignoring, and the trustees, I can remember Charles McCarthy, a former selectman, back 3 years ago, when he was in office, said that the trustees could be charged with negligence if they didn't do something with the property soon. And I do think that this is time to do something with the property. I just am hoping that the trustees collectively make the right decision. Mrs. Kelly?
I just wanted to add that, what's not to say that if we have two proposals that that fall short for different reasons. One is a negative impact on traffic in the town, and another one isn't enough money. So we don't have a good enough proposal. Why do we have to vote on one that's not going to be right, as opposed to like tabling it and trying to go back to the drawing board a little bit? Since we don't have we have two proposals that one's negative impact on the town and the other one's not enough money for the poor. You know,
Well,
it's like, so.
I think that the trustees are comfortable with the two proposals. Mrs. Kelly?
Thank you. Kathleen Terrell, Whittier Road. I'd like to say, Mr. Sweeney, that I realized that there was no legal requirement, but the direct abutters were not notified of this meeting tonight. And as a courtesy to the direct abutters, of which I am one, I would respectfully request that this vote be postponed and after I learned about this meeting, and I know it's been in the Milton paper, but I did not read this. I learned about this meeting when I received an email at approximately 2 o'clock respectfully, as a courtesy to the direct abutters, please postpone this vote. It's my request.
Mr. Flynn, would you comment on that request, please?
Mr. Chairman, members of the trustees, I'm not sure I have a comment. The speaker was correct that there's no legal requirement to give notice of this meeting to abutters other than the normal public notice. So I think it's in the discretion of the trustees whether to proceed tonight or whether to grant the request.
Would you frame what the request is? So we know. No.
To hurt to wait.
I second that request.
Third.
Fourth.
Is the request to not have you vote now, or to have a later meeting where everyone can come and then have the citizens?
I'd be happy to,
What is it?
restate it, Mr. Sweeney, if I'm recognized.
If you would.
My request is that the trustees postpone voting, taking any action on this tonight as a courtesy to the abutters, and that the trustees notify the direct abutters when the next meeting will be held. And I'm saying as a courtesy.
You have a motion on the table right now.
Yeah, we have to do something with the motion on the table first.
Procedurally?
Yes.
Procedurally, I'm told that we need to deal with the motion on the table first.
Did Mr. Flynn say that?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Hurley's correct. You have to dispose of the motion that's before you in some form. Take some action on it.
And what would be the choices of those actions on the motion that's before us?
Vote in favor it, vote against it, withdraw it, table it, postpone for consideration at a future time, or among the
Mr.
possibilities.
Chairman, I'd make a motion that we table the motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that we postpone any further vote until the 27th of June, at which time give the residents time to read the proposals, and we will first listen to their comments and then take a vote.
Is there a second? I'll second.
Point of information, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Flynn, I hate to put you on the spot again, but we've gone through this process, and we come to this tonight without having revealed any of the proposals or the price proposals, the appraisals, all that sort of thing to the public. And I think that's probably driving some of this frustration that we see here tonight. Is it and I was under the impression that it was under your advice that we did not disclose all this stuff because of the 30B law and public bidding laws. Can we release all this, the price bids, the non-price bids, and the appraisal after tonight, prior to the June 27th meeting?
Mr. Chairman, yes.
A motion's been made to table, and I'll second Mr. Hurley's motion to table the motion.
Well, my motion was to
voted on the
postpone.
table.
Yeah, we voted on the table. My motion was to postpone the vote until June 27th.
Okay, the motion is to postpone the vote until June 27th. The motion's been made, it's been seconded.
Well, can I
Any
make a friendly
discussion?
amendment? Can I ask for a friendly amendment? That we release as a part of that vote, that that the trustees release the bids, the non-price bids, and the appraisals to the public prior to the June 27th meeting, so that
Yes.
if questions are going to be put to the body being us, at least they be informed,
Yes.
informed questions.
I'll accept that friendly amendment.
Okay, so that's part of the motion.
Any further discussion? All right, Mr. Regan, I'll recognize you.
Just curious on the 27th, will the vote still be for just those two proposals, even though you're releasing
Yes,
information about all of them?
yes.
For various reasons, Steve, you'll see that the three other proposals did not meet the criteria of the RFP. There were different reasons that each of them were taken out of consideration. It's because of what the criteria we had in the RFP that they did not meet them. And actually, some of them were, like for instance, the Mulligan-Friedman proposal was basically the same as Pulte, but it wasn't close on price. So, if you, that was one.
But it will still be down to those, the two proposals?
Yes.
I believe so, yes.
Right. And I think what's happened here tonight is good. Everything is now public. You can tell what the selectmen have been negotiating on in private, and I don't believe there's going to be any further a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the trustees. All the numbers are in, the price proposals are in.
Right.
You heard where we're at, and I'm certainly sure you got a pretty good read.
Excuse me, speak, citizen speak, Gene Irwin, precinct 9.
Wait a minute, well, hold on. We have a motion. Have we voted?
No.
Okay, so why don't we take the vote first?
All those in favor of postponing?
Right.
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous. Mr. Irwin?
Thank you. Gene Irwin, town meeting member, precinct 9. With all due respect to everyone, I think you're missing the entire point. Governor Stoughton was a tycoon. He left tons and tons of money to Harvard University. He left scholarships. He built the bridges over the Neponset. In his will, he specifically left the land for the poor. The land. I emphasize the quotation. He could have put aside, he could have sold it himself, put a little bit of money in the bank, and let you guys dole it out for the last 300 years. But I think by selling the land, the Copeland, I think, is the best offer because it maintains the land for the poor. They've always been philanthropic. They've always, taken care of the needy in this town. They've taken care of kind of every need. And you're giving up the land, with the exception of 4 acres. And again, I emphasize this is all about the land. The Copelands allow the town to maintain it for the poor. And I think, I say they have a great big $5 million dowry. It's not what Governor Stoughton wanted in any way, shape, or form. He had plenty of money to leave for any selectman or any trustees to make that deliberation.
Mr. Irwin, 2 points. Well, first of all, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that we have got a legal opinion that that based upon the reading of the will, it is proper to sell the land, that there is no prohibition against selling the land. That's the opinion. Secondly,
But he would have sold it himself. He had tons and tons of land all over the state.
yeah, and again,
The biggest landowner.
again, it was 310 years ago. We certainly can't get into his head now, but I understand what you're saying. But the second thing is, in terms of, under 30B, in terms of evaluating the proposals, we have to evaluate the proposals on their face. There is nothing in the Copeland proposal that proposes to use that land for purposes of benefiting the poor. And that, unfortunately, had they put anything like that in, certainly I would have considered it. But they didn't.
All the more reason to reopen the bid.
Mr. Irwin, in terms of like the land, what you just said has been of concern to me. It's one of the reasons that, in terms of being a supporter of the Copeland Foundation, I know that I'd be preserving open space. One of the things that causes me to take that position in terms of open space is that about 5 years after William Stoughton passed away, there's a town record that indicates that Governor Stoughton left the land to the poor of Milton forever. And that has always, and still does, concern me, that statement written like in 1706, that the governor left the land to the poor of Milton forever. That has been a concern of mine for all these years. It's one of the reasons why I'm leaning towards the Copeland Foundation in terms of the Copeland's proposal is closer to meeting that statement about leaving the land forever.
Right. And I happen to start again until we get something the town can unite on. Thank you.
Yes.
My name is David McKay. I represent Weston Associates, one of the respondents.
Sure.
Earlier in your discussion, you mentioned that 3 of the respondents have been disqualified. I wasn't sure if they were disqualified or eliminated, and I'd like to know what the reasons might have been for the disqualification.
No, I think any statement that I made was that the selectmen trustees had 5 proposals and were most impressed with 2 of them, Copeland and Pulte.
So it was not a disqualification?
You're saying, was there a disqualification?
Yes, there was. The
There
3
was.
of them were eliminated because of criteria that they did not meet that were in the RFP.
Correct. Then that criteria, Mr. McKay, the criteria that the trustees decided on and discussed was that anybody that wished to bid on the property had to attend a mandatory meeting. And one of the bidders, as you well know, did not comply with that requirement, and it was not considered a small matter. It was a mandatory meeting.
John Carroll, Whitney Road in Milton. The $5 million price tag has been a big selling point, I guess, in the final decision making for the trustees each year. But I think if you're gonna look at just the money, you have to look with the money that comes in, you have to also look at the money that's gonna go out. In terms of what is it gonna cost the town? I don't think any study's been done showing what is it gonna cost the town over the years, and how quickly is that $5 million gonna be eaten up, or the difference in the 2 prices. I think the other proposal, the cluster development, is going to create more in Milton, because it's going to eat up our services, it's going to burden our services and our tax dollars, and it's going to create more poor in Milton and not benefit any poor in Milton. And it's the poor of Milton, not the poor in general, the poor of Milton that are supposed to be considered by the selectmen, and the selectmen, selectmen tax, are supposed to consider the impact on the town when making the decision. So I think looking at it without the money first is a good idea. And that's how you can have, a decision without the money first. But when you're just looking at the money part of it and that's changing your mind, you have to look at the money going out as well to make sure that that will indeed change.
Okay.
I would suggest that a study be done to see how much it's going to cost us in terms of services, in terms of traffic, in terms of police, school teachers, things of that nature, when we have additional cluster development in the town. And I still don't see how a cluster development benefits the poor of Milton in any way, shape, or form.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Mr. Hurley, did you
Yeah,
wish
well,
to respond?
first of all, the $5 billion is separate and distinct from the town. That does not go into the town budget, into the town coffers. It stays with the trust. So there is no diminution of that $5 million, even if there is additional services over and above the tax revenue that's raised from those additional homes. You've got to decide. Well, that's the point I'm making. The $5 million doesn't go into the town. The $5 million stays with the trust for the benefit of the poor. So there's no diminution of that $5 million because there's extra services. There's extra services. There's also extra revenue. There's an extra probably 400, maybe more thousand of revenue. Is that sufficient? As I said before, adding 21 or 23 homes is not going to add police or fire. We're not going to add extra fire fighters. We're not going to add extra police. We have basically what we need.
You can say that. You're going to have a lot more people. How can you say you're not going to add extra fire, police, and school teachers? What are they going to do?
Well, I didn't. In terms of school teachers, that's based upon class size. You're certainly adding children to, who knows how many at this point, but you're certainly adding children to the school system. They're higher-end homes. Family sizes tend to be smaller, but you certainly are adding school children. Yes.
Does anyone else wish to address the trustees? Mr. Mulligan?
For the public record, I'd just like to say that early in the process, as it was alluded to earlier on, there was a public meeting that we were supposed to have attended. We inquired as to whether we would be allowed to bid. we were told that we wouldn't be allowed to bid despite that failure. So we would like all the records to be, all the proposals to be disseminated, to be reviewed by the town.
John Hazzard, precinct 9.
That-
Mr.
Mr. McHugh, I think that was the motion. That was my motion. I want everything out.
What's to stop Pulte, assuming their bid is the one that is selected, from closing on the land, paying the $5 million, assuming they do, although from my understanding, home builders, they're not gonna pay that money until every contingency is resolved. And then once they determine, they start doing their site studies, and they determine there's ledge there, which we know is there, there's a lot of wetlands, which we know are already there, and they say it's just not feasible to do it the way that we propose it. And now that it's in private hands, they flip it to a 40B development. That is a very possible scenario, and that, I think, would happen, because none of the home builders right now are all suffering. As we know, we're suffering from a nationwide downturn in housing. There's not a shortage of housing, there's not a shortage of affordable housing, there's affordable housing everywhere. So there's nothing stopping them from doing that if their proposal is accepted.
Mr. Mulligan?
Like the trustees have constantly stated about the Attorney General want to have the final say on this. Like, why don't you solicit the Attorney General opinion on these two class proposals before you make a decision?
No, it's my understanding that the Attorney General doesn't have the final say. A probate court judge has the final say. But the way that it's been described,
Recommendation goes
but,
to the Attorney General, right?
but the way it's been described to us from the very beginning, 5-6 years ago, was that you're not going to get anything past a probate court judge if you don't go in with the Attorney General in approving of whatever plan that you have. So that's why we emphasize the Attorney General so much. And actually, like I say, they're the ones that started this whole thing, when they said we didn't have a plan.
Joanna Soros has,
Copeland gets dismissed out of hand, the police should be presented to that.
I don't think Copeland was dismissed out of hand.
That's the way it seems to be going.
the attorney,
Well, like, I think an opinion from the Attorney General would be like a huge help to the committee.
the charitable division, Joanna Soros, in the AG's office, has seen and reviewed the Pulte proposal and the Copeland proposal, and prior to looking at them, she said that she wanted to make sure that the Attorney General's office didn't go into probate court in an adversarial position with the town. And I haven't received any information that the Attorney General feels that either proposal would necessarily be considered adversarial to the Attorney General's office.
Mr. Mulligan, we have had informal talks with the Attorney General throughout the whole thing. What they've made plain to us is that we're the trustees. They want us to come forward with a plan and a proposal that they can then study and approve. They don't want to be seen as the catalyst to them being the ones that are acting as trustees. We're the trustees. They want us to act as trustees, take a vote, go in with a plan, and then both present it to a probate court judge. That's the way it's been explained to us from the very beginning.
Mrs. Carroll?
What is the plan for the court? You have a plan of sale of the land and $5 million in a pot, but what is the plan to benefit the court? Isn't that what the Attorney General is looking for? How different is it for the $5 million to sit in the bank account or for it to sit in land? What's benefiting the court?
Well,
What's the plan?
Well, right now, the town has a Milton Residence Fund, and it's run by a social worker, Diane Ferrari, who does a fantastic job, and she distributes money to needy people in Milton, and frequently will send a request to the trustees asking for financial assistance to various individuals. It could be for fuel bills, could be paying some rental bills. So I think that initially monies would go into the Milton Residence Fund, and that then they would then be used to benefit the poor of Milton. I also think that there's a lot of poor in Milton right now, especially the elderly, that might have too much pride to request assistance, and they really need it.
Would a pantry do a similar thing? A pantry that's been proposed by Copeland?
See, the pantry is basically a volunteer thing. If we were able to get like $5 million or even $2 million in a fund, we would be able to do more things such as outreach, that sort of thing. For instance, one of the things, we just hired a new veterans agent. Some of the things that veterans, even veterans here in the town that you may not think about, go through, really may need a fund like this to help them, over and above any benefits they could get from veterans. There are avenues that we haven't even explored because, for the last 300 years, it's been people bring us problems. And it might be buying diapers some month. It might be, helping someone with their rent, especially in these times that are down. We do see the problems. The town has responded in the past to problems like this. That's the reason MRE exists. The Milton Housing Authority, that sort of thing. But we don't.
I don't think that was the intent of Governor Stoughton.
Well, neither one of us can sit here and say we know what Governor Stoughton intended. We have to go with what a court will rule because of what he put on paper.
Cost to the town, why don't we take some money from it's gonna cost the town more in service-wise than we're getting the $5 million. The $5 million is gonna be gone in no time, where the land would be there forever. I think the land should be used to benefit the poor.
Ideally, it would be wonderful if the land could be used to benefit the poor. Does anybody have a proposal out there? Because none of the proposals came in using the land per se to benefit the poor.
Go back to the drawing board.
None of the proposals, none of the proposals,
Blow money fast, so this will go fast.
none of the proposals came in, with the exception of an affordable housing proposal, to really use the land per se to benefit the poor. The Weston proposal was a great proposal, an assisted living project, but that wasn't to benefit the poor. Again, it was a noble project, and I did like it as I read through that proposal, but it didn't benefit the poor.
We're at Milton, you gotta remember that, too. It's not just the poor in general.
Believe me, we know that.
Yes, I understand that. But like I said, none of the proposals had any substantial use of the land for the benefit of the poor. So, it's raw land at this point. I guess you could farm it and give the food to the poor, but, what do you do with it? The food pantry already exists, so all we'd really be doing is moving it and building a building for them. So we're not creating a new food pantry, we're moving a food pantry.
Does anybody at the table wish to make any final remarks?
Services for the poor, you guys are just gonna blow this in no time. The trip was all over for the poor, the government has so many of them.
But we have a trust.
All of us paying our taxes for the
Don't,
poor all the time, poor.
Mr. Friedman, I set a time frame of, Mr. Friedman, I set a time frame of like 8:15, and I'd appreciate it if you would be the last public speaker this evening, and then the public certainly welcome to comment at our next meeting, which will be on June the 27th. Mr. Friedman?
You have two proposals.
Copeland proposal, the Copeland's last one.
$5 million, with the $2.3 million essentially being paid immediately, and the $5 million being paid, 5 years from now?
No.
Once the developer gets done all the preconditions to actually closing and then funding. So has anybody done, perhaps Mr. Hurley being an accountant, has anybody done a study of the present value of the $5 million offer being paid in 5 years or 10 years, whenever the development agreement finally gets done and closed, versus $2.3 million today?
Well, first of all, we don't have a crystal ball in terms of how long it's going to take to permit.
Well,
And
you know that in general, if you look at other communities.
Clearly.
Whatever, it takes 5 years to 7 years. If you go to Braintree, it takes 3 to 5 years. So historically, from doing these things, from the RFP to the end, that it takes on average anywhere from 3 to 5 years minimum. And with the DCR and the permits that you're going to need in this instance, it's probably 5 to 7 years since you need a vote of the legislature to get the DCR curb cut. So has anybody looked at what it's worth to get $5 million 7 years from now, with all the contingencies that you have, versus $2.3 million today? 1 in the hand versus 2 in the bush.
Okay, well, first of all, the 1.7 is paid over a period of time. It's not paid up
Has
front.
anybody analyzed it? That's all I'm asking.
Nobody has specifically run the present value, at least as far as I know, nobody's run the present value.
Which one was a better economic benefit to the town? You didn't look at the present values.
They both have long-term payouts, though. None of them are immediate pay.
So did you look at the present values or didn't you?
No.
All right, we're going to be meeting again, and you're certainly welcome to attend the next meeting on the 27th at the Council on Aging at 8 o'clock. Is there a motion to adjourn the 8 p.m. on the 27th? Yes. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Well, let's talk for a second about how, is this stuff going to go up on the web? How will people access it?
Okay.
All right, so
Yeah.
the information on the proposals is going up on the web, on the town's website, and we do have copies here for the media, okay? Has the motion been made?
No.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.